Hello everyone, Jamie Hall, Definitive Imaging here, back for another post-processing tutorial, this time looking at sharpening. You may have noticed that I've gone for a bit more of a classic YouTube lighting aesthetic, hopefully working my way slowly up in the world. It's a bit budget, got a bit of a way to go, but you know, we're getting there. Today we are going to be talking about sharpening, something that is pretty integral to me and my workflow. Every image that I post, and to a large point print, is going to have gone through some sort of sharpening. We can use third-party programs such as Topaz, but we can also sharpen in Lightroom and Photoshop as well, and there's different modes in each one of those with different sweet spots. Sometimes I'm using a combination of 2 or 3, or sometimes I'm just using 1. Just depends largely on the image, but it's all sort of a finite balance between finding which is having a good positive effect on the image and what is then degrading your image and sort of over the sharpening. So we'll talk about some of that. So using the other videos as reference, we've already taken the photos, we've stacked the photos. In these photos specifically, I have already done all my edits, so they're basically like ready to go. They're pretty much looking as I want them to when I post them. I'm just going to be adding some sharpening. When people look at their phone or look at their screen and look at the image, I really want that image to be jumping out almost 3D. I've kind of had a bit of an obsession with sharpening since getting sort of semi-serious into photography, so it plays very much into my hand. And these are some of the tricks that I use to get the best out of the image. Okay, so in Lightroom, got 4 images here, got a couple of different spiders, a damselfly and a bird, and I'm going to show you sort of my favourite and or go-to sharpening techniques for these. They are all quite different. Where should we start? Let's start with this spider. Absolute beautiful Selena species, really nice image, super happy with this. It is just, even though this looks pretty sharp, there is still a bit that can be done here. The advantage with macro using that additional light source and being close, our photos are already pretty sharp, especially compared to a lot of long lens stuff and portrait stuff and natural light. We're going to get so much sharpness from them, but we can really go a bit further than that. I've already done my repair on Photoshop on this image, so let's go into some sharpening. First thing I'm going to show you is Topaz, a really good plugin. Now, contradictory to what it might say here, the sharpening tool from Topaz is very good at making sharpness where there is not sharpness already there. So if you have motion blur or if you slightly missed focus, I generally use this again more on things like birds and stuff where the photo isn't already sharp. This will recover a lack of sharpness. Topaz DeNoise, however, does a really good job at subtly sharpening images that are already pretty sharp. So pretty much all of my sharpening as a rule is going through Topaz DeNoise. I do use, as I said, Photoshop and Lightroom, but my default is going to be Topaz DeNoise. So let's go in there. Okay, so Topaz, on the right hand side we've got different modes here. We don't really need to worry about the severe noise and the low light. As I said, in macro, we're always going to have a pretty sharp photo for the most part. So standard and clear is what I'm going to be looking at. I have started to use standard a bit more for some images that have already a lot of detail on them. Sometimes, again, you can get over sharpening. So something to just sort of be aware of and be mindful of. You don't want it to look fake. I have definitely posted shots and printed shots that were over sharpened that just got taken a bit too far, so be wary of that. However, the clear method is generally the best method that I like to use. Again, surprise surprise, this was pioneered again by Mr. Ben Smallworld, who was kind enough to tell me about this part of his process a long time ago, and now it's just integrated into my workflow. So with this, it's about finding the sweet spot. As I said, this image is already pretty sharp, but we can see that there's, you know, some of the edges could be a bit sharper. Certainly some of these spines, if we come up here, we'll look around this area, and on the clear, on the lowest setting, this is it now sharpened. So this is before. You can see a little bit sort of, you know, not blurry, but certainly not defined. And on here, and then this is after. There we go. So you can see it's really tidied up these areas. If we look here, let's zoom in a bit further. Zoom in on this side here. So before and after. And then if we look at all these fine details again, before, look at these spikes here, look at these hairs, after. It's having a reasonably subtle, but certainly a very decent and noticeable effect. And when we look at that on the whole image, it's going to be making quite the difference. So again, this is after, this is before, after, before. Everything is just tightened up a little bit. This image is an image that has a lot of detail. Your eye is all over the place in this, so I don't need to go mad with the sharpening. The two lowest functions on this is probably going to be okay. Often it's worth checking out what Topaz will think. I will often default to the auto just to see what it thinks, and the good thing is that if I just click over now to this low and the medium, that I can make a very quick comparison between the two. Which do I think looks better? So I spend a lot of time looking at all of these options and slowly just having a look and seeing where that sweet spot is for the sharpening and which is looking the most realistic. For me, this for now, low and low on this, nice and easy. We'll save that through and this will import back into Lightroom for us. Happy days, one sharpened image. With, say, this shot, again, this is already a really nice sharp shot, loads of good detail going on, but it can still be better. So let's, again, I will quickly resize this just for making it easier to see what we're doing. So we'll put this back into DeNoise and we'll do exactly the same thing again. So on this image, it is a little bit different than the previous. We've definitely got points of interest here. So we've got all of these hairs that are where all the details coming from, and then we've got a lot of background blur in between the hairs. There's not much detail, so we're looking to accentuate the details on this, not the entire image, which means we can probably get a bit more heavy-handed on this. Again, I'll start with the low and low, and if I am going to hold down the space bar, we can see the before. So this is the before and this is the after. If we look up in the eye hair here and just around the hairs here, before, after, again here, before and after. Huge difference. Like these sorts of white on black where we're getting that blur can really make a big difference to just accentuating the contrast edges, so we get a really nice sharp shot with this. Again, what we are doing, because we're on low and low, on this image we see we're starting to get like a kind of noise. It's kind of over sharpening these eyes a little bit, which isn't particularly desirable. So I'm going to put this removal noise up to medium, and what we'll see is that's actually taken some of that additional detail we didn't need out. So again, this is the low. We can zoom in a bit more for this. So this is the low, bit of extra artifacts here, medium, and it's helped to clear some of that up for sure. So again, this is the before, now we're really nice and zoomed in, and after. You see how it's just tightened everything up, everything's just a bit tighter. We can, on this image, we can try and go high, so it's going to reduce that noise even more, not a lot of noise here, and increase some of that sharpening a bit more. And again, wow, like the difference there is, it's absolutely huge. This image, we can see that on high and high, we've not really got too many like artifacts. We've not got the sort of granular stuff. We've not got the pixelation. So this image actually goes really well for high and high. And I would probably export this with high and high, as long as I'm happy that it doesn't look too sharpened and sort of a bit too much. Then on this image, high and high is probably going to do a pretty good job. So let's look at this damselfly. This damselfly is significantly smaller than the other subjects. I don't remember exactly, but I'm getting a bit of a bigger crop in here as well, so I'm losing a bit of resolution. So it's not going to be quite as sharp. The edit is quite reasonable. We've got loads of hairs in here. We have got loads of detail, which doesn't look bad at all. But, you know, it definitely could be a bit sharper. Well, let's have a look at what DeNoise does with this again, just for the last time, because it's a slightly different image in nature in terms of its sharpness. I really want these eyes to be popping, and I want those to be the 3D element as well as some of the hairs. High and high looks okay here, but you can see it's starting to break down some of this because the noise is turned up quite a lot. So if I go to low, we can see we're getting the accentuation on the eyes, but we're not losing the detail here. So again, this is before, okay, and this is after, before and after. And again, this is just to demonstrate the sort of sweet spots within each one. We could look at the standard on this, but the standard is generally going to do a better job at, again, removing the noise. If there's a lot of noise or a lot of busyness, the standard will work quite well in removing the noise, and the sharpening is not quite as severe, not quite as heavy-handed, but sometimes it can be quite nice if we look at, say, this area with the standard, because there's sort of all this water, it works really well, but then with this eyes it's not working too well. So we'll stick with the clear for now, and if I want to remove some of this additional noise, I can try the medium, but again, I'm just losing detail here, so this is going to be probably another low and low if I was going to use Topaz. Okay, so if you don't have Topaz, what are other options? We can use Photoshop, and I know quite a few photographers that use this technique. So again, we'll just open this image in Photoshop. This is a really simple, quick sharpening technique. Command and J is going to duplicate our layer, and what we're going to do is go up to Filter, Other, and High Pass. Anything like this, you can always just type into the search bar and type in High Pass if you're not sure where it is as well. With the high pass, what we're doing is just sort of embossing the image and again accentuating the contrast edges. So you can see here we've got where the details are on the eyes, on the hair, where the detail isn't, it's not really doing much. We can turn this up quite literally to 11 and sort of get a bit rowdy with this. You can see how this is, and this will be horrible if we end up using this. What I like to do is I like to make this very, very subtle, and I'm kind of going to the point. So you see I'm just going up and down here. I want there to be detail in the areas that I want to be accentuating, but not elsewhere. So again, I want the eyes, I want the hairs. I'm generally going to be somewhere between 0.8 to maybe 1.2 if I'm really going for it. But again, this is a subtlety. We want to be nice and light with our sharpening here. So I go OK, and I am just going to blend this via overlay. Okay, and again we'll go before and after. Zoom in a bit more. So this is before, and have a look at the hair, some of the details here, and after. Again, it's a bit subtler, but this can be really good if Topaz, which is doing a lot of different AI and global sharpening, this is good because it's just going to go on those particular areas. You can mask in Topaz, but I find it very, very slow and quite painful. I haven't actually tried it on my new much faster laptop yet, but generally I find it painful. And obviously what we could do is we can sharpen the image in Topaz, and then we could use both layers and we could mask one of the layers and just paint on the stuff. I haven't actually done that before, but theoretically it's something that we could do, but we might find there's a little bit of difference between the image. But what we can do is very easily sharpen via a mask on Photoshop. So if I mask this layer, Command Delete is going to turn it all black. So currently I am now not using any of the high pass on here. B is going to be the brush. I'm going to go for a reasonably hard brush, so shift and bracket key to make smaller, and now I'm just going to paint on where I want detail. I don't necessarily need detail like on this part of the eye here and on some of this part. I don't want the eye to be drawn to this, but I do want it to be drawn to the eye. So let's just paint over the eye, and you should be able to see quite quickly, just as I turn that eye on, that it's just had a subtle difference that's just kind of making that eye, you know, pop, as people say. So again, go on some of these hairs, go on this other eye, go on some of the face hairs here, and maybe just on these spines over here as well. Cool, so I'm not going absolutely crazy. I'm just looking for those contrast edges, the bits that I want to really be jumping out of the photo. And we'll see if I press this. So this is the parts that I've actually sharpened. So again, before and after, zoom in a bit more. This is before and this is after, and although the difference seems reasonably minimal, once you get that on your phone screen or you've got sort of nice tight pixels, it will definitely have a bit of difference for your images. And again, we can use a bit of both. So if we've done the Topaz DeNoise and we've got rid of some of that noise, but it's not quite tight enough, we can always bring it into Photoshop and sort of double that up a little bit and then just sort of go for the eyes. It's just really important to make sure that, as I've said before, you're not overdoing it. Now, although I didn't actually do this on this image before I posted it, again, it's just going to be another good example of some sharpening that we can do in Lightroom. There are other sharpening methods as well. Photoshop has a smart sharpen, which will do a pretty good job. Again, that's going to be finding the contrast edges and doing some kind of AI aware sharpening on that. Good to check it out if you again don't want to invest in Topaz. But one of the other things that Lightroom has recently is this enhance feature. Again, I've just typed it into the search bar. Again, we need to use this sparingly, but I have used it on a couple of images with pretty good success. This is the after and this is the before. So you can see we've got all this pixelation on the images. If we try and sharpen an image that is already pixelated, we're just kind of sharpening that pixelation. So this can help to soften up some of those artifacts and some of those additional pixelations. Again, sometimes it will have an adverse effect. Every image is a bit different depending on the subject, the details, and all that sorts of stuff. But if you can get to that nice sweet spot where we are going to be enhancing without degrading, then we can look to do the enhancement. The enhancement will actually make the file bigger as well. The idea of enhancement is to be able to print something that is fairly low resolution bigger by increasing the sort of number of pixels and cleaning it up a little bit. So I have used this once or twice and we've had pretty great effect, but every program is going to start making your file bigger. So for example, this shot I actually used as a bit of a concept. So in this there was an element of Topaz, there was an element of enhance, and there was an element of high pass, and that's just because the image was pretty clean, but it was also very, very small, this spider, this tiny little 2mm spider. But because it was quite wide, and I know that I'm not going to be coming in and posting something like this. Like if we get this close, we can start to see that it's kind of a bit overcooked, as we would say. But as soon as we zoom out, this doesn't look too bad at all. And certainly if we zoom out to this point, or if I'm posting an image that's just going to be like this full length, then that's going to look really, really good. So you can use a combination of all three as per this image, but again, need to be sparing and need to find those sweet spots for them for sure. Okay, I'm just going to do one more example again on this. So this is a really amazing osprey. I haven't got the diffuser on there, so although we've got some detail in here, it's nothing like a macro shot. It's also a fairly shallow depth of field. Because I was actually quite close to this bird, it was 10-20 feet away from me on a pier. But I just wanted to show you some of the effects that Topaz will have on these shots. Again, I'm going for denoise. This is more of an image where I could potentially sharpen, but the points of interest on here are already sharp anyway. So again, gonna start with low and low, and we can see this is the before and this is the after. Before, after. It's brought out loads of detail on the beak, loads of detail on the eye, and all these individual feathers are looking really, really nice. So that has had an absolute perfect difference. I'm pretty sure that if I go to medium on this, it's going to basically remove some of that sharpness. So again, they're low, you can see nice and tight. If you go to medium, it's removing some of the noise, because we kind of want a little bit of noise or pixel difference in there to help accentuate that sharpening. And again, if I go to high on this is probably going to be overcooking it. We can see in here it's just starting to get a little bit too sharp for my liking. So for me, before and after on that, absolutely perfect. I can apply that onto that bird, and that bird is going to look super sharp in those sharp areas. It's also going to help to, again, differentiate or offer separation or difference between the sharp and the not sharp areas. So down here on the bird, on the chest and the bird, and this back headline, we've got a bit more of a shallow depth of field, so it's really going to pull us into that eye. But that is sort of a reasonably quick look into sharpening. As I said, you can use the Smart Sharpen on Photoshop, but between Lightroom and Photoshop you can get some really good results. If you want to be getting that real top quality sharpened images and having them sort of pop out of the screen, then Topaz is probably going to be a pretty good option for you too. Alright, so hopefully that's been handy. I'm keen to try and do some not so in-depth and too crazy tutorials, but again, just exampling some of the software that's available, some of my process. We're slowly seeing all of my processes in terms of how I get some of the results. And you know, it's all meticulous, it's all anal. I am then going to be doing optimization for my exports, which is really important. There is no point in doing all of this and then uploading a full resolution file to Instagram or Facebook. They are going to do their own compression on your images if you post a full resolution image. I have tested this quite a few times, and I tested it recently in WA with a couple of guys, blind test, and sort of said which one of these looks sharper, posting a full resolution and a compressed resolution, and it was unanimous that the compressed one did look much sharper. So for me, this is like the final piece of the puzzle. As I said, there's little point in going through all this effort to try and get nice sharp photos, and then for me posting a full resolution image which someone else is going to have control over how they compress it. With this, by taking Instagram and Facebook's compression algorithm out of the mix, I have control over how the image looks, and then I can post the image often to a test account. So I have another account where I'll post the image to make sure that it's represented how I want, and then it's sort of optimized for Instagram before I post there. So yeah, they are some of the tips and tricks that I use for sharpening. For me, it's pretty integral. I think it's very important to present your work as best as you possibly can on the different mediums. This obviously is not going to work if you're doing full resolution prints. You need to sharpen and export for your mode of consumption, as it were. So if you're going to be printing, do a test print. It's not going to come out the same. But for phones, for screens, for social media, this is going to be my bread and butter. Hopefully that has been helpful for you. Hopefully it's a good way for you to up your game even more and a bit further in your post-processing. I always mean to say this earlier, but I completely forget. If you want to subscribe or like the video or send me any comments, then always welcome and happily received. So please do that. Otherwise, I will be with you soon for another tutorial or another peek into some of the photography tricks that I use very soon. Many thanks.